This is our talk on vitamin K. Let me see how I turn the slide here. Oh, this is cool. Okay. So I grew up in India. I was a missionary kid. I went to a British boarding school. I went to Johns Hopkins undergraduate. I went to Yale, I spent 25 years doing emergency medicine. I was the director of the St. Luke's ER. I became Aurora's wellness teacher about 2005, and for 5 or 6 years I did that. And I got my board certification in anti-aging in 2008, and then I got blah, 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 blah. Okay. I'm currently working on an advanced fellowship in cancer care. I'm totally fascinated. We are going to turn cancer care in America on its head. And I can't tell you how engaging it is and how fun it is to give people who have cancer hope. And it's also fun to just watch cancers shrink better than with chemotherapy. So my objective is I'm just going to tell you the story of K2. I have a 3-hour lecture here, but I'm going to reduce it to 40 minutes, so I've drank 2 cups of coffee and I'm ready to go. I'm going to teach you what K2 does, the calcium conundrum, what went wrong in our history, and then we're going to talk about healing bones and a whole bunch of other fascinating stuff. History, how it got lost. It got discovered, vitamin K got discovered by a Danish biochemist who was simply feeding chickens pure cholesterol, and he noticed they bled to death. And then bit by bit they added things back and figured out what it was that kept them from bleeding to death, and they found, it took a couple years, and they found this thing called vitamin K because it caused coagulation. In German you spell coagulation with a K. So they called that K. And then Dr. Doisy in America figured out exactly what it was, and they got the Nobel Prize for it in 1943, and it was all about coagulation. The book's closed, thank you, World War II's in progress, let's not do anything else. They made 3 big fat mistakes. We found K1 and K2 at the same time. We thought they were the same thing. We'll get to that. They aren't. We thought it was all about coagulation. It isn't. And we decided that deficiency was very rare, and that was another mistake. It turns out that K1 is up here. In K1, you can see there's no double bonds along the line here. Those double bonds, for those of you who are organic chemists, are the whole story, what makes this vitamin act markedly differently from 2 different places. So those are the mistakes we made. Those are 2 forms. So in the next 50 years, the scientific world found out that there was other things that made vitamin K2 work. For example, we found osteocalcin. Turns out to be the most abundant protein in your bone. And we found matrix GLA protein in the 1990s, which is the protein that pulls calcium out of coronary arteries. And both of those, we found them independently of vitamin K. We didn't know about it at the time, but we knew it was part of that, and there was something to do it. We were trying to sort out those pictures. So those 2 were found in like the 70s and 80s and 90s. But we thought vitamin K2 deficiency was rare. And it turns out it's not rare. When we started looking at K2 to look at deficiency, we learned how to measure uncarboxylated osteocalcin was the test. And we measure people's uncarboxylated osteocalcin level. We realized that American women have as much as 90% of their osteocalcin is uncarboxylated. It hasn't been activated by K2. That's what's going on. American women have 90% uncarboxylated. So here's this vitamin that we thought was the deficiency is pretty rare. And suddenly we realized, wait a minute, it's not only rare, it's a runaway epidemic. Every woman we know has osteoporosis. And every man we know has coronary artery disease. What's going on? What's happening? What's the whole story? Well, the fascinating thing is this stuff was all discovered 70 years earlier. But first of all, pop quiz. Vitamin K deficiency is common? Almost universal. No, that's K1. I gotcha. Okay. K2 deficiency is common. K1, you all make K1 in your gut. It's around. There's plenty of it. In fact, they were right when they said K1 deficiency is very rare. So pay attention. It's late in the afternoon, but come on. Okay, we discovered that K2 deficiency was common in 2007 when we learned how to measure for the presence of uncarboxylated osteocalcin. True or false? Right. The lights suddenly turned on, so it's only been a couple of years we've known this happens. So osteocalcin is the protein that binds calcium in your bone. K2 activates that protein. That's it. Okay? Let's go back to activator X. 4 years before the Nobel Prize is given to Dr. Doisy. That sounds like a swear word, doesn't it, Dr. Doisy? 4 years, a researcher who didn't know what he was investigating invented something he called activator X. The problem was he was just a dentist. And he was in private practice. He wasn't in an academic medical center. His name was Weston Price. And the real problem is that he was from Cleveland. Nobody would respect anybody from Cleveland, would they? So Western Price's a dentist. He actually got to be filthy rich, and he got so much money, he took this thing called a camera, and he travels all over the world. He wanted to figure out how come he got sick and tired of cavities. He says, I'm sick and tired of taking care of cavities. He's now been called the Charles Darwin of nutrition because he traveled all over the world trying to figure out what are indigenous people eating that leads them to having perfect teeth. And so he's going to all these places, and he was on a worldwide tour with his camera, and he wanted to say, why did they get teeth? So he went to Swiss valleys, Peruvian, Amazon, New Zealand, Maori, all over the world. And he noticed indigenous people had beautiful faces, nice, square, symmetrical faces, healthy arches, no cavities. And then until they got exposed to Western food. When they got Western food, the first thing that went apart was their teeth went bad. So here's Western Price. That's what he looked like. Nice, sweet man. And look at the beautiful people he's taking pictures of. Look at those beautiful faces, those nice symmetrical faces, until you go over there right. Look at those lovely teeth on the right. Oh my gosh, guess who's eating Western food? And so he found that healthy people from indigenous societies had perfect teeth. I grew up in village India. I had to brush my teeth and I had cavities. The kids I played with had perfect teeth and never brushed their teeth. Mom, I don't want to brush my teeth. My friends don't brush their teeth. Anybody ever heard that from your 8-year-old or whatever? So Western Price found common threads. He said foods that can be transported long distance, stored without spoiling, rice, white flour, sugar, vegetable fat, canned goods are trouble because they're associated with lousy teeth, crowded dental arches, cavities, and then before you know it, tuberculosis, cancer, heart disease, and all the rest of the picture. He said there's missing some essential factor. In his findings, he said traditional diets contained 10 times the amount of fat-soluble vitamins. He focused on the fat-soluble, 10 times the amount of K, A, and D. And he said there has to be something missing there. Where do those things come from? Well, they come from organ meats, like eggs and chicken and yolks and livers and butterfat of cows eating rapidly growing grass. So Western Price comes back to Cleveland, and he gets the farmers of eastern Ohio to give him their butter in April and May, when it's grass-raised butter of rapidly growing grass, and rapidly growing grass is filled with vitamin K1, okay? He gave his activator X, which he combined by taking cod liver oil, vitamin D and vitamin A, and mixing it with his butter, which is vitamin K, and he started giving that, and he called that activator X, and he cured cavities. Did you hear that? He cured cavities. Did you hear that? Okay. Let me show you some pictures. Here's a famous picture of 20 cavities that he got to go away with vitamin K2. Here's a picture of a broken down high resolution picture. You can see the dentin filling in under the cavities. So, pop quiz. Vitamin K was discovered in 1995, 78, 37, or 29. And the answer is all of the above in little pieces, because it's been a journey as we've gone down that road. So different people discovered different pieces. Western Price made his activator potion from what? Butter and cod liver oil. Okay. We missed K2's action because we thought all of K's action was about white blood cells count going awry. False. It was blood clotting. Okay, I want to see if you're awake. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We missed K2's action because we thought K deficiency was very rare. And that's true. Okay. So here's K1. We're not going to talk much about K1. That's your last chance to see a picture of it. What does K2 do? K2 does a bunch of things. It activates proteins responsible for calcium and phosphorus deposition in bones and teeth. It directs childhood infant growth by preventing premature calcification of bones so their face matures fully and they get a fully formed face. It plays an important role in reproduction. Sperm has a high level of osteocalcin. It activates proteins that cells are signaled to produce by vitamin A and D, which is where osteocalcin comes in. It protects the mouth and teeth and saliva. You dramatically lower your bad bacteria in your mouth. It protects against calcification, inflammation, in blood vessels. This is where coronary artery disease comes in. It helps make myelin sheath of nerve cells, which is where multiple sclerosis. This is the hottest topic in MS right now for those who have any friends with MS. It's essential for proper facial development of full arches and less crowded teeth. It's dramatic insulin effect through osteocalcin activation. And so these folks, not only do they have beautiful teeth, but they have all those other functions going on with them because these people are eating animal products that eat grass. They come from herding societies where they eat animal products that eat grass. What happened in America? Also, the calcium conundrum. Here's the calcium conundrum. About 50 people have asked me today, should I take calcium for my bones? And the answer is no. The British Medical Journal, women who take extra calcium for osteoporosis are at greater risk of heart attacks. 3 less broken bones, 6 more heart attacks per 1,000. This came out about 2 years ago. So please, anybody in this room who's taking calcium, stop taking calcium. We'll tell you how to do it a little bit later. So the conundrum is too much calcium in arteries, too little in bone. What's going wrong? Both of those processes are vitamin K2 processes. Repeat, both are caused by a deficit. Too little in bone, too much in arteries, both caused by inadequate K2. So just a little risk. Here's what osteoporosis looks like. Half of women over age 50 have bones that get honeycombing like that. Women going through menopause lose about 25% of their bone mass over the next 3 years. 12% of men will break a bone, but 75% of hip fractures never again regain independence. 33% die within 3 months, and as many as 20% of American women are getting hip fractures. So American women, if you compare precise populations of African American women in America to Nigeria, where you can get sort of genetic crosswalk, is an 80-fold difference in fracture. So American women are breaking their bones, but if you compare American women who have very fine wrists, so for those of you women who are here, put your fingers around your wrist. And if your fingers overlap, you have a fine bone structure. If they just come to end like this, you have an average bone structure. But if they don't come together, you have large bones. But if they overlap, if they overlap a little bit, then comparing you to women in New Guinea who have big bone structure, your risk of breaking a hip is 1,100 to 1. And we in America just sort of take it for granted and say, guess what, ladies, it's just going to happen to you when you turn 65, and the orthopod comes and talks to you about how lovely he can help you fix that hip and replace that hip, and they've got all sorts of little metal things they can put in you that can fix you. And as you grow older, you can also have your back gradually fall down, so you get, more and more curved back, so then eventually you can't even look up over your shoulder because your vertebrae are doing this stuff, and so you start looking like this. Or you can break a hip. So what does K2 exactly do? Actually, we now know the molecule precisely. It modifies 2 proteins that are otherwise inert. Both of these proteins you put out when you take vitamin D. So you put out enough of these proteins, but osteocalcin binds calcium, and it basically chelates it. And chelating means a claw or makes a scoop. And you see the 2 calcium, there's the carbon dioxide. K2 adds that, and it puts calcium in between, just like, oopsie daisy, sorry. It puts calcium just in between, so electrically it captures it, and then it can plug it into bone. If American women have 90% of their osteocalcin, and osteocalcin, the most abundant protein in your bone, if you aren't activating all that osteocalcin with vitamin K, then no wonder you have lousy bones. American men only break their hips at 20 times the rest of the world. Oh, heck, that's almost nothing. We should be outraged by 20 times. We should be outraged by double. But the fact is, we've been taking it for granted and saying, well, no big deal, we'll just get to you when we get to it. And besides, that we have an orthopedic hospital with wonderfully charming orthopods who would love to take care of you. So the calcium conundrum is that we get calcium in our bones and not in our arteries. That's backwards. You've been texting. All right. 2 major proteins that K2 activates are called osteocalcin and matrix GLA protein. Okay? American women break their hips at about 50 times the rate of women in less industrial societies. By at least 80 times more, and maybe as much as 1,000 times more. So the hospital I grew up in, the friend I played with in India, who's now a doctor in the state of Orissa, Ajit Singh knows me. I've given him a computer, so we email each other. And 2 years ago, he asked me to send him a used hip prosthesis. His hospital is responsible for 2 million people, and 2 years ago, he saw a broken hip. He was so excited. I had visions in my head. Used hip prosthesis, metal detector, Forest Home Cemetery, 10 o'clock at night. And I can just see the police pulling me over and saying, and just what were you doing? But I figure every other burial site has a hip in it, right? I'll find one sooner or later. Okay. Americans get shorter as they grow older because they are lacking K1. It's K2. Okay, so osteocalcin looks like that. It binds 3 calciums. After collagen, it's the most abundant protein in your bone. It's the most abundant protein in your bone. And actually, A and D both cause osteoblasts to secrete more of it, but it's not activated till K2 shows up. That's it. That's the simple physiology. That's all you need to know about it. But that's not all osteocalcin does. Once osteocalcin is activated, it goes to your pancreas, where, in fact, the highest concentration of osteocalcin in your body is your pancreas, and it dramatically lowers the need for insulin. So it makes you much more sensitive to insulin, as much as a 50% reduction of insulin. That's not all it does. Osteocalcin also remarkably helps male fertility. So couples who are trying to get pregnant, in indigenous societies, the men and women get the organ meat of animals because that's where the most osteocalcin is, or the most vitamin K2 is, so that they have a better chance of becoming fertile. So matrix GLA protein, well, if you look at the walls of walls of arteries look like they're bone. They're turning into bone, ironically, because they're doing the opposite action of what's meant to be happening in your arteries. So we have hardening of the arteries. Turns out matrix GLA protein does the exact same thing. It chelates calcium, but it pulls it out of coronary arteries. So the Amsterdam study shows we'll get to it. It's about 40% reduction. So basically what went wrong? This is what Western Price observed about healthy populations. They ate high-value animal food. He made his activator X from spring-raised grass butter. So there's a Swiss cow, and he observed that, in fact, in Switzerland, in the remote valley he went to in Switzerland, they saved the early spring butter and fed it to their children and pregnant women all year round. Nobody else could eat that butter. And we thought that was interesting. Where do we raise our cows today? Do you see any grass anywhere in there? How about our chickens? How about our pigs? This is what you're eating when you're eating animal products. And who else makes K2? Nobody else makes K2. You don't get K2. So what difference do you see in those pictures? No grass, no sunlight, no dirt, no artificial feed. We thought it was omega-3 fatty acids. It turned out it was none of that. It's fundamentally our industrial food supply has changed. We've changed our food supply, so we've missed that phenomenon because we basically assumed that the animal was moving and had red blood come out of it when it died. It was meat, and that was all you needed. The macronutrient protein was all that mattered, and of course we all know that that was a blunder. And indigenous populations ate freshly prepared food, whole grains, no sugar, animal products being found by hunting or raised on grass, special attention paid to high-value fat. Children were fed organ meat and butter before adults, living outdoors, getting lots of sunshine, which would then induce the production of all those vital proteins, no artificial fats. So probably all of these things are important. So the physiology is as follows. If you look at green grass, you find that K1 is in the chloroplast right down there. You can see on that picture in that circle there, K1's right there by the green thing that captures sunlight. And so an animal that eats green grass gets K1, and in their stomach and mammary glands they change it into K2. So you are what you eat, but you are also what your animals eat. So for those of you who are vegan or vegetarian, you're not going to have a very healthy supply of K2 in your diet. So for you, it's critically important to get K2 from another source. And there's other sources of getting it. So for example, any food that's yellow, so if you're willing to eat butter and it's bright yellow butter, if you buy grass-raised butter, so go to Whole Foods and buy Irish butter or Danish butter, you can get cut butter with K2. I was in Geneva visiting my son in Geneva, and we went to a restaurant in Paris, and in Paris, every restaurant you go to, they put ice on the butter because in France they don't like having American butter, because in America we feed our cows cottonseed oil so that the butter doesn't melt at room temperature. In France they want grass-raised butter. And so guess what happens to their butter when your wife steals a pot and puts it in her purse? It melts. So then she has a messy purse, and then she says, "Oh, I have a messy purse. I have to buy a new purse." I've heard that line before. Okay? So research findings show, for example, grass-raised chicken eggs have much less fat, more vitamin A, all sorts of vitamin E, more folate, more B12, 4 times the vitamin D, less cholesterol, more K2. You know, grass-raised animals have multiple benefits to their foods, and it comes out in their fats. Pop quiz. K1 is found naturally in green grass right next to the chloroplast. True. Okay. It is changed to K2 in animal guts and mammary glands. True. Grass-raised chickens have more vitamin A, more omega fats, more folate, more B12, more D, less cholesterol, more K2. Right. Indigenous people in Price's research always fed their children and pregnant women high-value animal organ food. True. Isn't that an interesting story? So there's a couple other things. For example, if you eat trans fats, you know what happens to vitamin K? You completely flip it over and destroy it. We've been getting 9% of our calories from trans fats. In fact, you can measure that breakdown product called DHP. It's a measurement of poor quality food. And trans fats completely inactivate. So here's another good reason to get away from trans fats. So yeah, that we flip over that bond and make it flip over in double form. So here's that structure of the family again. So there's blood clotting, here's K2, and then here's the lousy, dangerous, poisonous stuff, DHP. And I'm just showing you those pictures. So the question is, what foods naturally have K2 in them? Anybody here know what natto is? Anybody eat it with enthusiasm? Yeah, okay. If you want some entertainment tonight after this way late afternoon lecture, go home on YouTube and look up eating natto for the first time. It's apparently not a very good food. People describe it as something young children pull out of their noses with their fingernails. I'm trying to be polite company here. So the history of natto goes as follows. It was a dark and lonely night in Japan 1,000 years ago, and two armies are facing each other, ready to attack each other, and suddenly the trumpets sound, and they have to douse their fire in their cooked soybeans they throw in a stack of straw. And 3 days later, after battling for 3 days, the soldiers finally remember, oh my gosh, there was those soybeans back in that straw. And they came back and found it, and it tasted delicious. Well, apparently the Japanese eat natto from Tokyo up north, from Osaka down south they don't. The southerners think the northerners are crazy. Guess who has more broken hips? The southerners, correct. Guess who has fewer facial wrinkles? Correct. How much K do we need? We don't really know. What we find is things like the Rotterdam study in the Journal of Nutrition 2004, 57% risk reduction for death from heart attack with the top third of MK4. 25% all-cause reduction. This is an epidemiological study. It's not proof. But would you like to have a 50% reduction in risk for heart attack? Sounds like a plan to me. We just don't know what it is. So the dose is things like this is what I've been selling today. MK4 is what animals naturally make. For that, we say you need about 45 micrograms a day, and that's what's in the low dose. People on Coumadin can safely take this and not change their Coumadin. The problem is it only lasts a few hours. We don't know if that effect matters. You'd suppose they have to take it 3 times a day, but MK7 from Natto lasts like 24 hours and once a day dosing. So the Super K actually has both products in it, which is why I think it's a great product because we don't have any beta data in that. A pop quiz. The highest source of K2 is a food called natto, a delicious preparation of soybeans from Japan. True on the concentration, maybe not on the flavor. Trans fats reinforce and multiply the effect of K2? False, utterly false, annihilates it. There are clear guidelines for K2 supplementation. It's very much in flux. We have no clue. It's going to be I believe K2 is going to be the story of the next decade. If we can have a 57% reduction in coronary artery disease and completely wipe out osteoporosis, it'll be a big story, but there's some other fun things it does. So let's do some of those other fun things. So it inhibits osteoclasts. In osteoclasts dramatically change. We know exactly what's doing. It seems to make a change in IL-6. Okay, we know about osteoclasts. In transplant patients have 34 times the fold of breaking bones. Turns out you can make a huge impact with that for folks on transplant because of their bone density. Those folks have been on too much prednisone. So anybody who's been on lots of prednisone, you really need to be on K2. If you take 1,000 micrograms a day to try to inactivate osteocalcin K1, you basically can't absorb that much from K2, whereas K2 dramatically does it, so this is K1 doesn't work. Alzheimer's disease, strong association between osteoporosis and Alzheimer's. And Alzheimer's patients have been shown to produce 50% less K2 in their diet or have 50% less K2. Skin wrinkles. The severity of wrinkles correlates directly with osteoporosis risk. I couldn't get my wife to take K2. I told her about reducing osteoporosis. She didn't pay attention. I told her about heart disease, 57%. She didn't put down the magazine. I told her about skin wrinkles. She says, bring me home 2 bottles. So currently, pseudoxanthin elasticum, which is basically wrinkles from hell, is now being treated with osteocalcin. Varicose veins is now being treated with K2. Diabetes, you need 50% less insulin when you take K2. We can tell you exactly where it's going on with diabetes. For example, in a 1 week on K2 on healthy non-diabetic trial, participants reduced post-meal insulin production by as much as 50%. If you reduce your insulin, Insulin's your storage hormone. So for those who are overweight and would like to use weight, you want to get your insulin level down. You can't lose weight until your insulin level's low. So K2 will help you lose weight. That hasn't been studied yet, has been reported. Rheumatoid arthritis, it helps. It helps in multiple sclerosis. It helps in cancer. The EPIC study from cancer from Europe showed quite dramatic results, as much as 30% less cancer risk in populations. I'm trying to do this all in 35 minutes. The EPIC study from Europe showed a 30% reduction in cancer risk from folks with the highest K2 intake. True? True. The diabetes is helped by K2, as much as 50% risk reduction. Wrinkles are associated with lower K2 levels? True. No, wrinkles are associated with lower K2 levels. Bone density improves with the most resistant patients of all, dialysis patients, when they take K2. Yes, they're the ones who need it most of all. So kidney disease, you can show a difference. Fertility, you can show a difference. This is the fun stuff. I think it's fun now. Facial shape. For those of you who ever heard of the Fibonacci sequence, that's the mathematical sequence that all nature runs on, that seashells are based on. 1 + 1 is 2, 1 + 2 is 3, 2 + 3 is 5, 3 + 5 is 8. If you take supermodels and look at their faces, you can show that they have precise symmetry. And you can show that rats and animals in experimental models, when they don't have K2, have asymmetrical faces. So beautiful people have symmetrical faces. When you have adequate K2 in pregnancy, you will have a child with a much more symmetrical face, because they were able to. Do we have any pregnant women here? Okay. So you're going to be on K2, right? Okay. All right. The hilarious thing was I put these two beautiful women on here, and my wife instantly knew who they were, and don't ask me to tell you who they are. So who are they? Actually, the one that's Gwyneth Paltrow, right? Okay, I'm good for one. Who's the other one? Whew. Thank you. Okay, here's just some examples of what Western Price's pictures show. If you look at the young girl on the left, she was born, look at her x-ray beneath. She was not treated with activator X. Look how crooked her teeth were. Look at the girl on the right. It was her younger sister who was born 5 years later during her mother's pregnancy. She was treated with activator X. Look how well her teeth developed and how smooth and natural they were. So here's Price's natural food formula. Here's some of the Fibonacci sequence data about what it comes to have a symmetrical face and a beautiful face. And many of you know many people say women from around third world countries come to America. They've lived in sun all their lives, and yet their skin is beautiful and smooth, and they have beautiful symmetrical faces, and we're jealous of how lovely they look. But if you look at two princes from Princess Di, look at the older one, his symmetrical face. Look at the younger one and his narrower face. There's actually research that shows this around the world, that the older born children tend to have symmetrical. This is probably a K2 effect. In fact, Western Price made the symbol of his organization the broad face. So he shows a narrow face in the middle with the Western Hemisphere, and then broader faces. That's the symbol of the Western Price Foundation. Labor and delivery. There's lots of data. This is complete conjecture, but indigenous societies frequently describe women having half-hour and hour labor, women rolling over and having a baby in the middle of the night. And not until they start eating Western food do we get around to having 24 hours of labor and delivery and having to use forceps and using Pitocin drips and all the rest of that. And so there's lots of data about that. We do know that vitamin D is also strongly associated with that. So for anybody who's pregnant, please make sure you're on vitamin K and D while you're pregnant. Strong bones, strong teeth. Price observed, I'm just going to go through this quickly so we can talk about it. In saliva, you dramatically cut down on the amount of bad bacteria. What's interesting is Price did this in America, and you'd say, okay, Price wasn't exactly accurate. Maybe he didn't know what he was talking about. But Mellenby then did it in England and did the exact same thing. And so Mellenby picked up Price's formula and was doing it in England. So now we've had two dentists who've cured cavities with K2. And I'm thinking, this is way too interesting. How do you measure it? The only way to measure it right now is uncarboxylated osteocalcin, a very unwieldy test. I've not been able to get it easily. I finally pleaded some folks at Frederick, and they were able to get it, but it took special effort and cost a fortune. I am now reversing coronary artery disease in my practice. Foundational to that is this is what Bill Davis was also doing. I'm getting calcium scans on people's hearts, and part of the formula for reducing that is to look at that calcium in their coronary arteries. There you see calcium in their LAD. That's called a widowmaker lesion, and we can reduce that. The Combe study is really what I wanted to get to quickly and make sure we review. The Combe study is the combination of micronutrients for bones. It was published from Canada in end of last year, It was 77 women followed for 1 year who took K2, 100 micrograms. So the K2 we're selling, and we have them back in the room if somebody wants to buy some from us. Vitamin D, 2,000, which is quite a modest little dose. Magnesium, 25 milligrams, a modest little dose. Magnesium is below calcium on the list. Magnesium is the same 2+ positive charge. Strontium is below calcium. It's also 2+ charge. So magnesium and strontium, vitamin D, and fish oil. A little bit of fish oil. Their bone density in their lower back went up 8% in 1 year. The best you'll ever get with a bisphonate, a commercial bisphonate, will be a 2% increase. Most of the time the doctor will say, we're going to be lucky if you stop losing bone. And the cost of the bisphonate will be about $3,500 a year, and the likelihood of you having serious side effects is about 50%. So it is my belief that these items, K2, vitamin D, magnesium, strontium, are food items. These are non-toxic food items, and it's like the light should be turned on. This is the end of osteoporosis. That's why we all have weak bones in America. It is time to get every American woman on vitamin K2. This is not brought to you by the American Orthopedic Association. Okay? Conclusion. K2 is a critical vitamin that has missed the radar. We lost it because it's confused with K1. That's all about blood clotting. It is involved in calcium metabolism, pulling it out of arteries where it shouldn't be, packing it into bones where it should be, but it helps myriad other functions. Diabetes, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, labor and delivery, and maybe beautiful people. The wellness model requires lifetime balance and support, so treatment after disease is much less useful, though there is no point at which starting taking it hurts you. So, there is no toxicity, prudent response, take the pill. Our animals don't have it. So, questions? Whew, did I do that in 40 minutes? Okay, you're right.
Okay, if someone can...
Thank you. But
with blood clotting issues, if they're not on any thinners, can they be on K2?
With blood clotting issues, there are some people who do have blood clotting disorders and both bleeding, and we don't have any guidance to say that about it. But particularly for those folks who make extra clots, what I've observed, I've probably put 30 or 40 people on Coumadin on the 45 microgram dose. I should have brought some today, my pardon, I didn't think of it. And most importantly, I put my father on it. My father is an atrial fib. He's 89 years old. It did not touch his INR, didn't change his INR 1 iota. In Japan, they give actually MK7 to babies at birth to prevent bleeding in their head, because they have like 1 per 10,000 babies have blood in their head from the process of trauma of birth. And by using the vitamin MK7, they prevent clotting. So there must be some tiny bit of overlap, but we don't have any data. So we just don't know. We can't say. Bisphonates? Well, how much money do you want to pay and how many side effects do you want to put up with? My advice is make your family doctor ecstatically happy and start taking the K2 and prove that you're getting better before you stop. Because if you're already on it, you meet criteria for needing treatment. So I don't want to go against conventional treatment, but most conventional treatment says you should be on it for 3 years, and then what? You're only meant to take it for 3 years. And your bones haven't improved, and your family doctor's in a conundrum. They're like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? What I want you to do is make your family doctor look really, really good and very, very happy, and then say, well, you don't need to take this anymore. If the side effect's causing you side effects, you have the right not to take a pill. It's your body, just stop the side effects. You now have evidence-based literature. Look up the Comb study, C-O-M-B. You can remember it very fondly because my last name is Whitcomb. How about that? Okay. Yes. How early to start and what dose? Western Price was giving it to kids when they were 3, 4, 5, and 6. He was giving it their Activator X. Indigenous societies have been giving high-value foods to their children since time began. If you can only find a pill, you're not going to make them toxic if you can get them in a pill once a week. They can the vitamin K2 pills are these little slippery dark things, and take one a week, and they're going to have a wonderful response to it. And think how many fewer cavities they're going to have. Right. Yes.
If you're
if you're eating grass-raised beef and free-range chickens, are you getting enough K2? We haven't a clue because we don't know how to measure it. I suspect you're getting some and probably doing much better than other folks are. So, yeah, you're probably protected. We just don't know because we don't know how to measure it. Yeah. Pardon?
Can K2 be passed through breast milk?
Can K2 be passed through breast milk? Yes. In fact, humans might make it in their breasts. It's just hard. We have not had a brave enough scientist study that one yet. You know. So, yes.
What is the dosage that you recommend? Is it once a day, 3 times a day?
I don't think you have to do anything 3 times a day. In fact, our body with the fat-soluble vitamins soaks up huge amounts of them and spreads them out over a couple days. So the Combe study was 100 micrograms a day. The pills I'm selling are 200 micrograms. And so I just tell folks, take them every other day. Just because you get 200 micrograms, don't worry about it. Just take it every other day. You're getting a good dose.
I know this you said not necessary to have calcium supplements, but that you can put calcium from your food. If you are on a calcium supplement,
Then stop. If you,
is it a harm to take calcium?
yes, you must have been texting. There was a slide back there, British Medical Journal, 2 years ago. Women who take extra calcium have 3 less bones, 3 less broken bones, and 5 more heart attacks. If you don't mind dying of a heart attack, talk to your life insurance first so your kids are taken care of, and then go ahead. Yes.
I heard something earlier about chelated calcium, and I heard you mention chelated.
Well, that's effectively how the K2, without K2, the glutamic acid molecule looks like this. The K2 adds the claw. So now the calcium can fit in there. It's like having a glove, a baseball glove without a thumb. Well, you can catch the ball, but it's pretty tricky, you know. And K2 then puts that extra claw in it, so now it makes a basket, and the calcium can fit in that electrical basket and be bound. That's called chelation.
So is chelated calcium with the K2?
And that plugs it into bone. And osteocalcin is the most abundant protein in your bone. That's how calcium goes into your bone. It gets into calcium, and the osteocalcin binds 3 of them with 3 little claws. But if you don't have any, if none of your osteocalcin's activated, you got 3 little thumbless mitts, which means you can add a couple. You can put some calcium in there, but it just doesn't go very well. You make. I mean, don't mean to make fun of but that's really what it's happening. It makes sense. Yeah. Once you get the visual of yes.
If you have osteoporosis, what is the time frame you could expect to see improvement like on a bone density?
In my practice, I'm measuring people's NTX urine, and I'm showing they turn positive within about a month, which is really fancy. It takes a year bone density takes a year to change. But once you know you're on the right path, happy days. Yeah, you've changed. It changes dramatically. I'd take one of those pills every day for a couple of weeks with osteoporosis, get started, but we can show your bones change quite dramatically within a month. You stop peeing out. The NTX urine is measuring the breakdown products in your bone, because bone is constantly being modeled and remodeled and modeled and remodeled. And so you pee out those breakdown products, and so you can show in your urine whether you're a healthy level or not. And within a month you get a healthy level, which is totally cool. I could go to 10 o'clock at night, but I'm also aware it's late in the afternoon. Thank you all for coming, and if those who want to leave, feel free. I'll take more questions if you want, but appreciate it.